Hi, you are watching or listening to the Shift Training Podcast.
We're talking about personal development. We talk about emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual health, and just overall well-being.
And today we're going to be talking about relative, subjective, and objective truth or perspectives.
Perspective. Ooh.
Okay. So again, subjective, relative, and objective. So I think a lot of times when we talk about truth, we think the truest form of truth is objective, meaning that it has a form that exists beyond all of our subjectivity, beyond relative situations. When it's the same all the time, when it's this truth all the time, that makes it the truest true. And I think that that's an interesting notion. I personally subscribe a little bit to that, but lately I've been questioning that and being more mindful about that kind of stuff, courtesy of Deepak Chopra. Shout out to Deepak Chopra for constantly dropping things that, make me remember the deeper places in my being. So we're going to go back a little bit. We're not going to jump to objective. Just remember that objective we usually define as like the ultimate truth. But let's start with subjective. Oh no. Yeah, I'll start with subjective.
Okay, subjective.
Subjective truth or perspective. What are your thoughts about people talking about their own personal truth? I think of own personal truth as like subjective truth.
I think it's just based on what they've learned, the environment that they're in, and they kind of shape this idea, this notion in their mind that's their own subjective thought.
That's the truth. That's their truth.
That's their truth, yeah.
That's right. I think that's a great way of defining that. Question for you. Do you think that our subjective truth includes or excludes our biases?
Interesting. I'd say, I think a little bit of both.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that you can't possibly have subjective truth without it being full of bias.
Yeah.
I find it hard to exclude. I think that the only way you can exclude a certain bias from your subjective truth or your own personal opinion or, your subjective perspective is when you change your perspective. When you change your perspective or you learn something new and grow towards that, I think that that's the only time in which we get to remove those biases.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be, that truth is always going to change until it's proven that it's not the truth, right? Like it's always, there's always this constant change.
Sorry for the airplane noise, guys. Or helicopter noise is part of how things go in LA. You just never know when something's going down in LA.
That's right. We have many variables in here.
Yeah, it's all good. So again, I think that things will always be changing, subjective, because we as people change in our views, change on things. So what may have been our truth when we're 10 years old obviously might not be our truth when we're 24 or 25 years old. There might still be some things there that are still part of our subjective truth, right? Like maybe the story that we tell ourselves.
Yeah. I think this is, I don't know if it's relevant to boundaries. When you're 10 years old, 8 years old, you have set some type of boundaries for when you're young.
Or none.
Or none, yeah, that could be true. But as you get older, those boundaries changes, like when you're 20s or in your 30s, having this conversation with your family, there might certain things that you don't want to maybe talk about or do things what they want. Those are subjective truth back then in your 20s, but when you're 30, that might be different.
Right. So that's subjective truth, our personal story, our own personal perspective, tell your truth. I think that's important because it's subject to change. It's subject to the situations. It's subject to the circumstance. And I think that, again, that there's a certain value to that. But I think the greater purpose that it serves is the ability to acknowledge it and compare it to relative or compare it to objective truth for tempering. I think if I were to define this as like a process, I would say subjective truth is part of the ore or natural elements that might go into making a sword. There's a whole process that you go through to get to that definite sword, which, by the way, still only works in some cases and not all cases. So the existence of the physical sword might be true, but how you use it, well, then we're right back to subjective and relative. But anyways, the idea that our personal truth is the whole truth. The idea that our opinion, our thought, our way is the only way, is the truest way. You don't know this way, you don't know the truth. This is the truth over here.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
I
that's
think
when
that
you become tyrant, Like,
yeah,
instead of like exploring it more, is there really the truth? Even if that's the truth, then maybe there's more truth.
there might be some more truth out there. Yes, exactly. So that's that's our 2 cents on
Yeah.
the subjective truth.
I-
Let's talk about. Oh, you want to?
No, you go ahead.
No?
Well, I was just thinking of this notion from the Buddha, right? Like
Hmm.
meditation, Buddhism. They call this I, me, myself. There's no
Mhm.
such thing as I, me, myself, or whatever, because it's this constant changing. Like when you were 5 years old, it's not you anymore. It's just
That's 5-year-old you.
yeah. And even every day, every day we change. And we're like a soul that's like just I don't know. It's
Constantly changing. Okay. All right.
Let's go to that.
Relative truth. Relative
Okay.
truth. Relative truth is relating to. So in this case, this is the truth, relative truth. Let's think of any situation or circumstance where maybe let me think of an example, actually, to be more clear. Okay, let's say that we know that it's true that if you want to go buy ice cream, you need to have some money.
Right.
And let's say it's you and you have a little kid with you, niece, nephew, student, child, whatever. You have a small child with you. You get there, you get the ice cream, person tells you how much it is, and we all know you need to have the money for the ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta have it. And your subjective truth says, oh crap, I'm a bad person because I don't have this, and now the kid's not gonna get the ice cream. But the situation might change. The little kid might be so cute or charming or whatever may happen, that all of a sudden the ice cream is given. Now the situation has changed. The relative truth has changed. A circumstance or something has interfered. It's only, the whole story that I'm giving is only relative to that scenario. It's only related to the idea that maybe if I show up with my best and wait, I find out I lack, someone else might show up and help me. Well, that's relative. We don't know. They may not. Relative. It's relating to the situation. You can't really chart that. Another example is also realizing in certain situations, different truths apply. So for example, your subjective truth that there's no way I could never act that way or respond that way towards another person. When you see somebody acting crazy or wild to somebody else or mistreating someone else, I could never do that. That's what your subjective story says. You haven't been in a relative position. You can't relate. Who knows what buttons have to be pushed for you to act that way. But don't think that it's impossible, or close your eyes or veil your eyes to that truth, to that possibility that you could act that way. And this is something for us to be mindful of when we're evaluating people's behavior. Judging or critiquing from the outside, which, by the way, I don't believe judging is bad. I will say condemning. Judging is evaluation. It's good for us. Condemning other people for their behavior as if we wouldn't potentially behave the same in a relative scenario is a mistake.
That's right. That's an interesting idea.
Relative truth, relative perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and think about when you're in a situation, how your perspective may change. So you may have your subjective truth, but in a particular situation, under certain pressure, all of a sudden it changes. Can you think of an example, Vaughn, where your truth is this, but under pressure it is different?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a time in my life where I felt so much pressure that it becomes not my truth anymore.
Can you give a recent example?
Let's see. What do you think is a good example for
What about
this?
you teaching, being a great teacher and a great coach, and a great dancer, and then being asked to teach dance?
That's right.
All of a sudden, your subjective is there's a change.
True. It's now has completely changed. Yeah, I think. Yeah, under pressure, it becomes different. I think there's something in there that changes the dynamic, and that becomes that relative truth, right?
Right. Yeah. The situation itself is now different.
Yeah,
So
you know to yourself that, oh my God, I'm capable of this. I'm confident. I'm someone who is capable. And then when put in the pressure, that's
Oh
where
my gosh, I forgot. I'm a sandwich.
you become insecure.
Yep, and that becomes the new truth relative to the situation at hand. So
And I think this one is kind of like similar to, let's say, when someone talks about, let's say, elite athletes, right? They are at this top of the chain and level, and
keep going.
when they say things that most people they can't understand them, that's like it's because they put in the work, the experience, the hard work, and the discipline. And while when they talk to someone who's like just a beginning, they can't relate.
Yep, 100%. Let's move on to objective truth because we're running low on time.
All right, let's go.
So let's hit the objective truth. I had to double check that. Yeah. So objective truth, that's like we said in the beginning, that is the
ultimate,
the science, the ultimate truth. It's the hard things. When you understand the actual scientific process, it's the idea of constant exploration. So for example, we find this to be true in this moment. We'll continue to investigate. We find this to be true. That thing was no longer true. So, it keeps changing, almost like it's relative truth, but we try to act like it's the objective truth. Like objective truth is like, my arm is here, but I don't know, is my arm here?
But
and
what about
where is here?
The law of physics, would that be an
objective? Because it's, one of the,
it's gravity.
No. We call it objective. It's objective. But at the same time, all the things that are objective to us, like Deepak Chopra says, the things that we see, the way that we perceive it, remember, the way that we sense the world is as human beings, is through our five senses. And our five senses have limited range for perceiving things. So we don't know, even though we say this is objective truth. It might be a societal truth that we all agree that this is the objective truth, but in reality,
it's not.
It's all relative and subjective truth. Not to say that morals and all things should be tossed out the window, but it's one of those things to think about how serious and how firm things should be, what things should really uphold. I think that certain principles are universal laws that seem to be true in various areas. So if I can see something that, let's say, in finance and religion and spirituality and physical health and nature, if I can see some parallels, some rules that still apply, for example, like gravity, or the idea of care or investment equals output. What the output is might vary, but you have to put in to get out. Certain things seem to be more or less true. Transferring of energy, blah, blah, blah. Those are some concepts or ideas that seem to be true, but objectively true. But at the same time, that's the best we can go with, because we don't know, because of our subjective and relative perspectives affecting our ability to even get to what we would consider truth.
Yeah, interesting. That's definitely an interesting concept, and something that we need to really sit down and focus and really understand it.
100%.
Yeah.
All right, Vaughn, is there anything else?
I think that's it for us.
All right, where can they find us?
All right, don't forget to follow us on our social media, Shift on Your Life, and don't forget to subscribe on our channel, Shift Training.
All right, thank you guys. Let us know what you think about this. Leave a comment, review. By the way, emotional wellness classes are currently going on. So if you're interested in joining us, send us a message. We'll send you the link, and we'll be glad to have you. Have a great day. Peace.